Today we're talking about power rack training because it was one of the biggest revolutions in strength training, and we're still feeling the effects of its development today. If you haven't noticed, every gym and garage in the world has a power rack in it, but few people know what it's for, how to use it, why it was actually designed. They just see something that has J-hooks in it and they're like, oh, it's a squat rack. That's a squat rack. That's a squat rack. That is not correct. The power rack is called a power rack for a reason. It has special functionality that many people are completely ignorant of and do not use to its fullest potential. See, if we get in the way back machine and go back to the time of antiquity, you're going to realize that there weren't a lot of options for lifting equipment. You had some weight, it was on the ground, your job was to get it not on the ground. And because it was the olden times, you had to walk uphill in the snow to the tetanus-infused junkyard to sift through rusted scrap metal until you found an appropriate set of railway ties or trolley parts that would allow you to commence your lifting for the day. You would then go about doing your deep knee bends or jolly huddles or twiddle thrusts before walking back home, which was also uphill in the snow, to start your 16-hour shift at the asbestos factory. So you fast forward into the 1900s, you got the Bronze Era, the invention of the plate-loaded barbell, you got racks and benches and machines being created, and now lifting is more accessible and we have workouts that look a lot closer to what we do today. It was still very much, though, do the fucking lift to get better at the lift. That was until the mid-1900s. You had Bob Hoffman running York Barbell Club in Pennsylvania, which handled most of the American Olympic weightlifters. As you probably know today, York Barbell also made a lot of equipment. And Bob Hoffman jumped on the isometric craze at the time. See, it was discovered that if you do heavy, hard isometric work, you get strength improvement within about 10 to 15 degrees of that position that you work. So it stands to reason, hey, if I do a lot of isometric work over the entire range of the movement, I should be able to reinforce my lift like a motherfucker and go out and beat those commie bastards. So that led to the creation of the York isometric rack. And it doesn't take a genius to see how this was probably a pretty cool, innovative feature in an era where power racks didn't exist. But if you're like me and you don't like small spaces, you probably look at this claustrophobic monstrosity and say, no fucking thank you. Because it was such a shallow build, you couldn't do anything that required any front to back movement, you couldn't walk out a squat, and you certainly couldn't bench press in it. And of course, the litmus test as to whether or not a piece of equipment deserves to be in your gym, ask yourself, can I transform this into a bench press movement? If you can, keep it. If not, get it the fuck out of here. So at about the same time in history, you have Bill Peanuts West, who is the OG head of the original Westside barbell in Culver City, and he's doing heavy ass overloaded work with 900 pounds in a squat. Now that's a lot of weight, but when you consider that Bill could only squat 500 pounds, it's a fuck ton of weight. Now unsurprisingly, something inevitably went wrong and Bill took a tumble with no supportive measures, and an ambulance had to come and wheel his ass out of his house in suburban Southern California to the chagrin of all of his neighbors. So while Peanuts is laid up, he's thinking to himself, gee, what if I didn't use twice my max in heavy overloaded work without spotters or safety measures? Now that near-death experience led Bill West to the inspiration to take the York barbell design and make some tweaks to make it actually fucking functional, which as it turns out meant just increasing the depth of it. And voila, you have Bill West taking a tumble in his garage to all of a sudden creating what is now the most ubiquitous piece of equipment in all of gym culture. But wait, there's more, because the OG Westside guys didn't get famous for inventing the power rack, they got famous for how they used it. See, Bill West and company were maniacs. They loved being in the gym. They would spend 6 hours in a workout and they were constantly picking apart their lifts and experimenting. And with this power rack, they began doing what they called sectional development, which is what it sounds like, picking apart your fucking lifts and developing yourself at different points along the way. It's basically the isometric craze with a bunch of extra steps added. They did deadlifts from different heights, they did pressing from different heights, and it was all in the same workout. You might do a full range bench, then go into an incline off the pins, and then again do an incline at a different angle from a bigger height, and they were continuously exposing themselves to more weight. So you have the presence of overload, which is important for maximizing strength development. But then you have working at different heights, which can potentially fix weak areas. In addition to that, you have variety for the sake of it, which is clutch for making you a well-rounded lifter and avoiding plateaus. Now the shit caught on because it worked, because you had guys like George Friend out of Westside, who is the first 800-pound squatter in the sport of powerlifting, and he just did it as a supplement to hammer throwing because he was smart enough to have a mentor say, hey, if you lift weights, you'll be a better hammer thrower. And the result was him getting to the Olympics and getting on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Fren even said in the beginning, when I hit an 1,800 pound total, I'll probably wrap it up. The motherfucker went on to hit the first 2,100 pound total in the sport. Imagine having the highest total in powerlifting, and powerlifting's only your side chick. They would also develop a professional relationship with Joe Weider and go on to write a lot of articles on their methods and ways to implement power rack training. Now, considering Joe Weider was the sworn enemy of York barbell head Bob Hoffman, I find it absolutely fucking hilarious that they were in Joe's magazines writing methods on how to utilize the piece of equipment that was an improvement on the York barbell isometric rack. And given all the stories about the character of the OG Westside crew, I cannot believe that they weren't aware that that was just a massive fucking troll. So how do you implement power rack training? Well, first of all, everybody starts to quiver and panic when they get too much variation, because it can seem daunting to consider all of the billions of exercise variations. Like, you have to try them all to experiment to find the one that's going to work for you, and that couldn't be further from the truth. There's only so many different heights you can set the pins to. There's only so many different angles, grips, and stances you can use, and as long as you are remotely close to what your main lift is, you are going to get some direct carryover. If it addresses a particular weakness of yours, even more so. Instead of getting paralysis by analysis, all you got to do is go back through some of the old articles written by Bill West or George Fren for Joe Weider and realize how slap yourself in the face simple this can actually be. You have your main lift, you have a couple of different heights, you have a couple of different angles, stances, or grips, and that's it. You rotate them through. You want to do something long enough to actually track progress in it. However, there's also a benefit to even rotation. This is actually what made modern Westside a sustainable training method for some of the strongest motherfuckers in the world. As much as people focus on the special exercises and the fixing or preventing of weak points, my opinion is actually the rotation of exercises made it so that you could train heavy year round without having to deload, without having to block your training off. Because the variation gives an element of recovery, you're not training the same fucking structures the exact same fucking way, which means you can go ham. The OG style of Westside training was very much train heavy year round. There was no cycling to speak of, no periodization to speak of. It was go heavy, progress your lifts when you're able to, experiment, and there were really no wrong fucking answers. When you're getting paralysis by analysis, feeling overwhelmed, just understand that there's no Nobel Prize being given out for fucking with your exercise variations. Keep it simple, and power rack training is one of the simplest ways to do that. Now, obviously, when you're talking about pin presses from a dead stop, it's heavily neurological, so you might be inclined to prioritize strength and neurological based thresholds. Low reps, done very heavy, a lot of strain, focusing on maximal motor recruitment and rate of force development. That means really strong, fast, explosive singles, doubles, and triples. That is absolutely the case, but you can also work them through any other rep range. Anybody that says there's no developmental benefit to doing double digits for something like a high pin squat or something like a mid-range pin press has never fucking done them, because I promise you there absolutely is. My brain likes to save that stuff for the heavier blocks when I'm getting closer to a contest, because I like to limit when I'm really experiencing that load, and I like to take long periods of time away from that load. However, there is no reason that you couldn't do this work in a base phase or a volume phase. You could absolutely decide to work on your mid-range strength while prioritizing volume and lighter weights with the other lifts. No reason you can't do that. If you are running Base Strength AI or one of my programs, you can very easily swap out the variations, because I use a lot of them, for pin variations that are accessible at any gym in the world or in your home gym, because you probably have a fucking power rack. That includes doing deadlifts at 12, 16, 18 inches. That includes low, mid, and high pin squats. That includes benches from different pin heights at different angles. In fact, for overhead pressing, I have had huge success with prioritizing pin presses right around my nose or eye level, because it doesn't take a lot of time before I'm handling just a shit ton of weight, and the rest of my strength goes up. My main lift just goes through the fucking roof. So I am a big fan of this style of training. So the way to prioritize this stuff, the lower pin positions, where you're talking about below or right around the bottom position of your main lift, great for starting power. You don't always have to do a deficit. If you're just at the starting position going from a dead stop, that can completely overhaul how you change direction in the lift. This is Robert Wilkerson doing a 600-pound fucking dead press off the chest. Just try to consider, given everybody is used to using stretch reflex on a touch and go bench, how much power is required in order to levitate this weight from a dead stop. Bottom up bench presses are fucking money. I actually like bottom up squats as well. They're a little more of a pain in the ass, but that's part of the feature. Having to take a weight from the bottom is entirely different. Even from coming down, sitting on a box or the pins and waiting for a minute, it's still so much harder to get it from the bottom up. That's one of my favorite accessories to put in. It necessitates less weight, so you get a reprieve from the constant beatdown of heavy ass weights. It's insane for rate of force development, for maximizing force production at the start of the movement, and they're a lot of fun. It's a nice break from the shit you've been doing as usual. Once you get above that, we're in the mid-range somewhere. We're talking about building strength at a common stick point, making sure once you get the bar moving, you can keep it going. Now, I like this as a default for everybody at some point in your training because 100% of you, whether you have a stick point there or not, are going to only experience weight at those positions when the bar has momentum on it. That includes deadlifts, benches, squats. You're only hitting the midpoint with momentum on the bar. So if you don't get any time under that weight with no momentum to pull from a dead stop and build strength in that position, you're always going to have a potential stick there if the bar slows down. You'll be absolutely floored by how quickly you see adaptations in these positions, and that carries over just so quickly to your full lift. And then lastly, you have the real heavy shit, which is the top end stuff. Honestly, this is just fun as fuck. It's fun to overload weights with maximal poundages, to feel weights you've never felt before. It gives you a boost of confidence, and the strain that you feel is unlike anything you're gonna feel when you're just doing full range movements. Now, one of the biggest benefits to your training is to utilize post-activation potentiation. Don't ever do high pin work, high overloaded work without taking advantage of the priming it does to your nervous system, because when you go back to lighter full range movements, they not only feel lighter, you absolutely can move more weight and move it faster. So something like an 8 rep max suddenly becomes like an 11 or 12 rep max. This is an absolutely established physiological phenomenon. So I don't ever waste the opportunity to get some good lighter full range work in after doing something that's really heavy and really overload. So we can thank the OG Westside crew for these innovations in training that many of us still use today. Everybody's aware of variations, but for some reason, pin variations have been long forgotten. And I'm not sure why, because it's one of the easiest things you can do that everybody has access to it. If you're using my programs, you can swap these in super easily. If you're using Base Strength AI, which is heavy on variations, you can swap any of the prescribed variations for low or mid pin work and just let the auto regulation do the rest. The result of progressing these exercises on something like Bull Mastiff or 70s Powerlifter will be developing ungodly levels of power that will make Zeus watch his fucking back. Big Dreams, Bad Genes tees are below. You can also hit the link below that and find out more information about Base Strength AI. If you're curious, take the questionnaire, see what goes into putting together a fully personalized program that not even an online coach can replicate. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.